Gracious, loving Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the Sabbath day. We thank you for the beautiful sunshine today, the nice temperature, Lord, and the fact that you woke us up this morning, the breath of life, Lord. I want to lift up those who are not with us for varied reasons. If it be sickness, Father, that you would bring healing. There's other reasons, Father, and you know what they are. And I just pray that you'll be with the brethren and give them the Sabbath blessing that you promised. And Lord, I ask for the guidance and direction of the Holy Spirit during this lesson. You promised that He is the teacher of all truth, so and that you would send Him just for the asking. So I thank you for sending the Holy Spirit to lead us into all truth today. And this is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, it's been a couple weeks. I think that that's the last week, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Brother Bob was between last time and this time. And, I just, because I've been out of it as far as, being able to participate for quite a while. And then I saw the lines in the schedule. So I volunteered for chapter 8, and then I just at the beginning of this week volunteered for this chapter. And anyway, I know you guys will help me out because this is a class, and in class you're actually expected to participate, answer questions, or give your comments. And in this class, it's okay to answer what you think the answer is. There's no grizzly bears up here going to tell you not to answer unless you have the right answer. You know what I'm saying, folks? We're not under that yoke anymore. So we're looking at Daniel chapter 10, and it's lesson number 11 in our quarterly, entitled From Battle to Victory. As we have found throughout the quarterly, that the ideas put forth, you're going to have to edit some stuff out probably, as we've gone through the study, the leading of the author is quite different than our understanding of truth. So this chapter was a little bit different. It's actually more difficult for me than I thought it would be. But I would less like to start with Sunday's lesson, fasting and prayer once again, basically pointing out how Daniel was much into fasting and prayer. I would like a participant from the congregation to read Daniel chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. Just 3 simple verses. Daniel chapter 10, 1 through 3.
In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. And the thing was true, but the time appointed was long, and he understood the thing, and had understanding of the vision. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 full weeks were fulfilled.
Okay. So I could be totally incorrect in my calculations because I'm not a Bible chronologist, but I calculated 20 years, I think, between chapters 8 and 9, and this, yes, okay, I have notes here. If my calculations are correct, 20 years went by between Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 9, because we had our given years of the kings, and I just went by my calendar in the back of my Bible. So quite a bit of time has gone by since he's had the vision, where actually in Daniel chapter 8 he didn't understand. We ended up Daniel chapter 8 without him understanding, but yet at the beginning of this chapter, chapter 10, we are told that he did understand. And there's a word that gets repeated several times in just verse 1. Can somebody tell me what verse is that is repeated?
Time appointed?
Say again?
Was it the time appointed?
No. I'm looking for a single word.
Single word.
Thing.
Thing. That's correct. You could have said that loud, brother. It's okay. You got a good one. It's a good one. Thing. And I know in the past we've labored over this word, this thing, a lot. And it's got a Hebrew. Now I'm only doing this because I think, from what my husband told me, I haven't listened to any Portugal classes yet, but there were students that didn't know how to use their e-sword to get or the Hebrew number or the Greek number. So I'm going to challenge you. Somebody can tell me what's the Hebrew number of thing. I think everybody has a thing, like this thing, that they can look up thing with a device. And tell me I'm just looking for the number. It's just a test to see if we all know. I don't want always the same student answering questions. So what number do we have for this word? Okay, brother.
H1697.
And what does it mean? Do you have a meaning there?
Yeah, the where's the bar? It says oh goodness, I got too much information from
Well, just say, I really am looking for just simple 2 words, or maybe just one.
Here it says a word.
That's it, a word. Just stop right there. The bar, and before I ever studied this Daniel chapter 10, whenever in my studies, I knew that the bar meant a word. So Daniel understands a word, and how can we, okay, I've got a question I don't remember how to answer. How can we apply this word to our understanding of this study? What's this study all about?
There's a vision.
Yeah, a vision. And so in understanding this, we would call this a vision, and I think in the past we called it a vision. And this is kind of an aside, but I think I brought it up when I taught last time, and I know that Elder Parminder has brought it up, and don't ask me which video, okay? Don't even begin to ask. But can a vision be audible? Because there was a question, it was because it was a study, I believe I think it was in Germany, where he was going through a little bit of Daniel chapter 8, and at verse 12 of Daniel 8, yeah, let's turn there. Just Daniel chapter 8.
Repeat the question for me.
Yeah, let me find my paper to repeat the question. How can we, well, we've actually answered that. I don't think I have a question yet.
You say Elder Palmer asked the question.
Oh, he asked the question, can a vision be audible?
Oh, okay.
Because we're looking at Daniel 8:12. Sorry, thank you for helping my mind, my brain here.
Is it verse 13 actually?
Uh,
The vision ends in 12,
it ends in 12.
and then he heard.
Okay, I guess that's how it is. Yeah, verse 13. I told myself to turn things over like that too. Right. So he's been seeing things. He's seen this, goat and ram fighting, and the vision ends, and then he hears in 13. Correction, verse 13. So then I heard one saint speaking. So Elder Parmenter questioned in the video, can a vision be audible? And when I came across this thing in Daniel 10:1, the word means a word. And if you actually take it down to 1696, which is the root word of that, it says arranging words as in a speech. So this is kind of an aside, but just something interesting to contemplate is, can we have audible visions? Though vision obviously means with sight, but we have a thing here repeated and Daniel understood. But for whatever reason, he's understanding now. He's going through a process of understanding, not understanding. He's mourning according to verses 2 and 3. He's mourning for 3 whole weeks. Now, I want to ask, what is he mourning about? And don't look at your lesson study, because it won't help you. He's mourning. The author would have you think, well, never mind. I think I was, he's mourning. We can look at our study, but it's a little bit different. He's mourning because of what's going on in Jerusalem, or not going on in Jerusalem. Let's just ask, what is happening or not happening that's causing him to mourn? Let's just put it that way. Go ahead, Bob.
I think it has a lot to do with the cause and effect of everything that he was seeing and the time element that's involved. And I think he understood that it was encompassing a period of time, and not only was he seeing the ram, but he was seeing the goat and he was seeing the little horn. They're all three are part of it, so it extends quite a ways.
Okay.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot to be considered, and what do we know about? Let's go back to verse 1. Who's the king that we're talking about here in Daniel 10:1? Who's our king? Y'all can read.
Cyrus.
Cyrus is the king, and what action do we attribute to him? And it's prophetically, what does Cyrus do? Come on, David, you're going to say it.
He gives the first decree.
He gives a first decree. So he's given a decree, and And my original understanding was, and I think it was corrected as I studied a little bit more, was that the decree wasn't being carried out at all, you know, but that's not so. It was being stopped. It was being, the enemy was interfering, and so this is what he was warning about, is there's a timeline going, you know, and things should be happening, but yet we've got a stop to that. And this has caused Daniel to mourn, and we know the theme of this whole book of Daniel, and the term is, I mentioned it last time and we had it wrong, it wasn't latter days, but there's a term only found in the book of Daniel, and to me, it's the theme of the whole book. And I think that ties into why Daniel's mourning, because, as Bob says, there's a time element involved here, but a theme, there's not a theme, but a phrase only found in the book of Daniel, and I think it's the theme of the book, and it's a really, go ahead, Brother Larry.
The mourning, so he was mourning 3 full weeks. Is he mourning for that pleasant bread, which I don't know what he means by pleasant bread? And is he mourning because he had no wine in his mouth, neither did he anoint himself at all for 3 weeks, or no? So it's not an appetite at all?
No, that's part of the mourning, the not taking of the pleasant bread is like dessert. That's how I understand it. And he's not taking of these things as part of the mourning, as part of mourning. And he's not mourning because he can't have those things, but those are, and which brings us to another topic of fasting doesn't necessarily mean no food whatsoever. He was fasting, but he was cutting off, you know, like your favorite whatever. You're not going to eat that for 3 weeks. That's what he's mourning for. But the term I'm looking for, and you guys know it, it's called the time of the end. And the time of the end is only, that phrase is only, the time of the end is only in the book of Daniel. So the whole theme is the time of the end, and Daniel is seeing this. He's seeing what's going to happen to God's people in this period of time, but also understands that by the books, because we got with that out of last week's in chapter 9, by the books, and all I could find it was the books of Jeremiah. I could not find that it was any other books, but just books by Jeremiah. But he was also understanding the time element of them, the 70 years and them getting released. Go ahead.
Yeah. On that point, when I said the time is long, there's obviously different sets of glasses we have to look at. We can look at the long term, talking about stuff that's going to happen in the latter days or in the time of the end. At the same time, Daniel's living in a time period where he's looking at the fulfillment of the 70 years having been fulfilled. They were in Babylon, and knowing by the books, by Jeremiah, that they were supposed to return. And even Isaiah is the one who prophesied about Cyrus,
Right.
about 150 years before he was born, that he was going to be the one who was going to give this decree for the Jews to go back to Jerusalem.
Right.
So for that to be happening is something that would be, because it's something that God said would happen, then Daniel's expecting it to happen. And so I see a partial tie-in here with the lesson and how they're saying that Daniel was mourning, and he's tying the event of the Jews actually getting out of Babylon and going back to Jerusalem. And so he's seeing that that's not happening the way it's supposed to. And then if you get to, and I'm not trying to jump ahead on you, the lesson.
That's fine.
But if you get to verse 13, or verse 12 of Daniel 10, it says, Then he said unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. And who is speaking here?
It's, you're asking,
Yeah, it's Gabriel, right?
asking the teacher? The teacher question?
Gabriel.
Yes, it's Gabriel speaking.
And we know in verse 13 it says that Gabriel is actually saying that part of the reason why there's been a problem here, it says, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. And then he's talking about how Christ had, Michael came and had to help him.
Right.
And so, I mean, that all ties in with the story. I'm just bringing that point up.
Right, and I'm not sure if someone's timing me, whatever, but we'll get to that there was a battle going on for the mind of Cyrus because there was this delay in the restoration, and it took Gabriel is striving with the mind of Cyrus, and for 3 weeks, but it actually had to go beyond that, and Christ had to come and intervene to get Cyrus to cooperate with the Lord's will, which for us personally, just know that, he's striving for our mind. Christ is striving for our mind too. Because we know Satan is also. But we can take comfort in knowing that Christ is just as much striving for our mind as he was for Cyrus's mind to cooperate and do his will.
Information warfare.
Yeah.
Information warfare, amen.
And if you put that at a corporate level for the Jews, you realize that they just got done spending 70 years in Babylon, where in a lot of cases, even against God's counsel, they were intermarrying with the Babylonians. They already, because they were there so long, they built homes there, they raised families there, they had businesses there, they were well connected there. And for them to have to leave a relatively cushy life that they were having in Babylon and to be told to go back to Jerusalem, which was left completely destroyed, and have to start all over again.
Right.
That is a huge thing, and I think if we tie that spiritually with us today, we have to realize that Babylon, at one level, represents the world, and God's looking at his end time people, and they're comfortable in the world. To be honest,
Yeah.
they're comfortable in the world, and God's saying, get out of the world, separate yourself from the world, and be ye separate, and come out and do the work that you have to do, which is a hard work.
Right, because now we're being asked, it's being required of us. We really didn't understand the statement of having lots to unlearn and even more to learn, and that's the rebuilding of Jerusalem, if I can say that.
You can.
I mean, I think we can apply it that way, that's what God is asking us, and it's an overwhelming, seems to me, like an overwhelming task. And, but yet, we can know from this chapter that, like I said, Gabriel is there striving, and Christ is there striving. We have holy angels, we're told, that are at our side, striving, working with the Holy Spirit. So, so the good news is, to me, I have to tell myself, is to not feel overwhelmed and let the Lord cast all our cares upon him. And he will direct us if our minds and hearts are open and willing to do this. So on Monday, verses 4 to 9, I wanted to read verses 4 to 9 of Daniel chapter 10. If we have a new reader, Carol, okay, Sister Carol. We're reading Daniel chapter 10, verses 4 through 9.
And in the 4th and 20th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river which is Hiddekel, that I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded as the gold of Pisa. His body was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire. And his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his word like the voice of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me. For my comeliness was turned in me into corruption, and I retained no strength. Yet heard I the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground.
Okay, thank you. So he's calling us a vision. He had a vision. And who was this vision of?
Christ.
It's of Christ. And we can know that from various verses. Multiple verses were listed in the lesson study. I mean, you could just do a word study, almost any word in that passage, and you would realize that he had a vision of Christ, and it put him into a sleep. It's interesting, it says, when he heard the voice of his words, then was he in a deep sleep. I think there's probably a lot we could, I didn't study this verse out, but just reading it just is intriguing to me that there's something valuable in those verses. So he sees Christ, but yet who, as we discussed moments ago, who's talking? It's not Christ, it's Gabriel talking
Yep.
to him. So it's intriguing to me as to why do we have a vision of Christ? Why does he have a vision of Christ, but yet have Gabriel do the talking? Go ahead, brother.
This is going back to Daniel 8:13.
Okay.
Okay, Gabriel, you just said Gabriel was speaking. Well, who was talking when it says, then I heard one saint speak and another saint? Who are these saints?
Right, good question. Well, we know that one is Christ, and that's the certain. Let me get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I'm on nine.
That's right.
So certain saint, doesn't say certain.
Yes.
My word, another thing, so to that certain saint, and this Bible doesn't have any notations, but the certain saint, most Bibles you'll have a little notation and it will say Halmoni,
Great number.
and be a wonderful number, things like that. So we know that one voice, which is the certain saint, is Christ. I could venture to guess, I don't even, and it maybe it has been studied out and shown to be that the other would be Gabriel. That they are the two having the discussion here in Daniel chapter 8. And I don't see a discussion here between Christ and Gabriel. I just see his presence that puts Daniel on his face. which then leads us to the infamous 3 touches. And my question is, and I haven't heard things new, I really haven't heard anything as far as this chapter and understanding present truth now. Has anybody, I'm just putting it out there, there's so many videos for us to watch. Has this chapter been addressed that anybody is aware of? Yeah, I don't think so. And so I wonder about the 3 touches because we put such a big
Emphasis.
I'm going to be honest, is I couldn't tell you one thing about those 3 touches, what they meant. And I don't know if because God wiped it away because I have to unlearn it, or if it's because so much stuff has come in and we haven't talked about it, it pushed it out. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot to say as far as how we previously understood the touches by Gabriel, and I really don't want to go by what's in the print here. Go ahead.
I have another thought that ties in with our understanding here at the end of time. It's an interesting thing in Daniel chapter 8, verse 2, when Daniel has his vision. He was by the river Ulai, and that's the one where he gets about the ram,
Right.
and the goat and the little horn and all that thing that encompasses so much time.
Right.
And then when you get to chapter 10, in verse 4, right before he sees he sees the vision of Christ.
Right.
He's by the river Hiddekel.
Correct.
And we know that the river Ulai and the river Hiddekel are the 2 streams.
Okay. Good point.
And that, one leads to the Sea of Glass and the other one leads to the Lake of Fire.
And Hiddekel leads to the lake of fire. It's
Correct.
Hiddekel. If you say kill, that helps me.
That's
How I remember. It's Hiddekel. You die at the
It ends with an
Hiddekel.
H too.
Well, that's true too. That's a good point. That's an interesting thing, and I found something interesting in the oh goodness, maybe it wasn't the study, maybe it was Daniel in Uriah Smith's book, where it says the word Hiddekel in the Syriac is applied to the Euphrates, in the Vulgate Greek and Arabic to the Tigris. So it's interesting. The Syriac says Hiddekel is the Euphrates, but yet all the others. Therefore, some conclude that the prophet had this vision where these rivers unite near the Persian Gulf. So this was kind of an interesting bit of information for me, is where they came together, and that's where he had the vision. But again, as far as the 3 touches, if we call it the binding off, that's what, if I am remembering correctly, that time period was called the binding off. But what we understand now, understanding our agricultural model, it can't be, that period is what do we call that period now? I really don't want to draw on the board because I won't do a good job. What do we call that period now? Should I draw it out? Will it help if I draw a line out? And I'm, like
Are
I
you
said,
looking at the dispensations that lead
Yes.
to the close of probation?
yeah.
Because there's 3
there's a-
dispensations that lead to the close of probation.
So there were quotes that were used, and I remember I was so excited when I found one. I think I remember sharing it with Brother Tyler, where she quotes about the 3rd angel's message binding off. And what you'll find good information if you watch Germany, the most recent Germany, because he really covers the three angels message quite well, and he talks about the binding off, but you have here, whatever, I hope I did this right. There's 1, 2. Okay, so you got your 1, 2, 3, 4 dispensations. We know what they, this one I think we should relegate to the trash can. But we understand, hopefully at this point, that it will plow the American way. Sorry. Early rain, latter rain, and harvest. So this binding off period, what we called the binding off in the past, is where on this line now? I mean, where would it be on this line? Agricultural line.
Question again, City.
Should be the harvest. Yeah, it's the harvest. And so there's a misapplication of the quote saying of how the third angel's message binds, because you would think that would be in here. But the third, we're told the third angel's message, if you go through that study, which I want to go through a lot better, the third angel's message is finished when? When does the third angel,
At the close of probation.
at the close of probation?
Yeah.
Correcto. And where's the close of probation on this line?
That's the latter rain before the harvest.
Right in here.
Yeah.
This is your close of probation. So if the third angel's message completes its work at the close of probation, it doesn't, it's not involved in the harvest, is what I'm trying to say. And
Right.
the quotes that, like I said, I found, not that I found, but I'm sure lots of other people found it too, about the third angel's message binding off. And we got all excited because it was like, oh, that goes right along with the binding off and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, that's the incorrect application of it. So, so all I can say is, I think the 3 touches fall in this area. Does that sound right? I mean, any thoughts out there of where? Because this would have been our binding off time. And that's when the touches we said came. So I was just trying to, and I never came up with an answer as to how to apply the 3 touches to the harvest. Is it the priest, Levites, nothing else? I don't know. That's just a big unknown. But I think there's something important. 2 of the 3 touches. I don't know if any of you guys have insights into, as far as presently now. Go ahead, brother.
I'm not familiar yet with any videos that may have already covered some of this ground, if they have. But if you look at just ask yourself the purpose. Why did God allow those 3 touches? What was the purpose of it?
Right.
It was obviously for Daniel to be strengthened.
Yes.
Okay? And if we understand at one level, what I do understand about the message right now is as we've come into this period of time, and I have seen one video recently that's been taking place in the class in Portugal, where everybody's asking Parminder and everybody, so what is November 9th? What was that close probation? And he's basically saying that other than the fact that all the other things we're understanding about the line pointed to that time, as far as our understanding of it, to be strengthened. Part of our being strengthened isn't just fairy dust coming and all of a sudden we just have the
Right.
strength. It has to do with the
Right.
message. It always has.
Right.
So it has to do with us unlearning and learning correctly, the truths that are there, and for all of the priests to be properly trained. I mean, even when you look at the Millwright time period, if I can go back there and look at October 22nd, 1844, that closed probation, they knew that was the date when it came. But did they understand what even happened there?
No.
It wasn't until after the fact that they could look back on it and they could understand it.
Right.
And so I believe that these touches are a strengthening of God's people, and that strength always has to do with the truth. And so for us to understand the truth better and to be prepared, because obviously we know by the time we get to the end of the harvest of the priests, that's when we are all we're fitted, we're all equally fitted to go forward and give the message and harvest the Levites.
So, a good point. So this time period here obviously is a strengthening, because if it's Jacob's time of trouble, we need to be strengthened
Yeah.
to get through it. But I really personally just couldn't, it just wasn't working this week for me to try to dig deeper into these three touches, and what because like I said, I personally forgot, or the Lord wiped it out of my hard drive, what they meant before, and I wasn't going to go by what we have here written. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up another point that I'm starting to learn, is if you understand that most of humanity, if not all of them, who are already in the grave, did they have the understanding that we have, or I mean, some probably were pretty enlightened with things, but there's a lot of people when they're in the resurrection, when Christ shows up and resurrects the righteous, there's a lot of people who are going to be resurrected that that are going to have to learn a lot of things.
Yeah.
Even those who are the 144,000 at the end. Do you think that they're done learning and understanding everything? No. So
My
when we get to heaven,
understanding is
gonna
we're
be-
supposed to be the teachers.
Yeah, but we have a
understand.
certain thing that we're supposed to be teaching right now, but as far as what we're going to be understanding and learning, we're going to be learning, and when you start to realize that once God's saints are all taken off this earth, and we're in the 1,000 years, that a lot of people naively think that that's a period of time when, everything's just going to be fine. We're going to be all just be happy and everything's going to be great. And the reality of it is a lot of people have to learn a lot of things.
Right.
And a lot of what they're going to learn is going to be painful. It's not over until after the 1,000 years. I mean, there's going to be a lot of tears. There's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of things to unlearn and things to learn. And I never really looked at it that way until recently. But it's important. And I think that's part of, in kind of maybe in a microcosm, that's what God's actually doing with the priests right now in our harvest time, between the closed probation and the next step.
Yeah.
And that's dispensation, so.
And you're saying what is God doing with his people? I just want to write it on the board.
We're learning more things about the truth. That when things are coming into clarity, we're actually learning how much we have to unlearn, what we don't have a right concept of. Because I think a lot of us just think that, that this is just an instant of time where all of a sudden everything's going to be perfect. And the way I'm understanding perfection and sanctification is that when they say it's the work of a lifetime, and if a lifetime, if we're only looking at it being our little probationary time here, I think that we're being myopic about it because a lifetime could be eternity. We're going to be learning and growing and learning how to reflect God's character more and more. And so there's an awful lot that we have to learn. And so there's certain things that God wants us to learn right now. And so that's why we're being admonished to watch these, the classes and the videos that are coming out at the camp meetings going on in different parts of the world, as much as we're able to, glean and look at some of these subjects and come up to speed. Because there's a lot for us to learn. And it does strengthen us. We need to be strengthened right now. As Brother Parmenter points out very clearly, most of those who are part of God's priesthood are very inadequately trained. They don't understand the truth. A lot of us came into the message at the very end of this 30-year period of time. It wasn't in the beginning.
But
And then there's a lot of people, a lot of the women, weren't even given opportunity to do things. And so there's just all the way around. People have to be trained and learn.
You need it?
No, I don't.
So I just wanted to bring that point up because I think that has to do with it may have to do with the touches. I don't know. I might be wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely lends itself to studying within the correct methodology, to say. As we go through, we know, I think we talked a little bit about Wednesday, this great conflict. Daniel, chapter 10, verses 20 and 21. And I think we've discussed this, how Gabriel says, since the moment I heard you pray, your first word, I wanted to come, but Cyrus wasn't going for it here. And that's why he had to wait longer to get the answer to the prayer. And so I wanted to read the bottom, the quote from Prophets and Kings on the bottom of Wednesday. So Wednesday, March 11th. If anybody, it's not if anybody, please somebody out there. Go ahead.
While Satan was striving to influence the highest powers in the kingdom of Medo-Persia to show disfavor to God's people, angels worked in behalf of the exiles. The controversy was one in which all heaven was interested. Through the prophet Daniel, we are given a glimpse of this mighty struggle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. For 3 weeks, Gabriel wrestled with the powers of darkness, seeking to counteract the influences at work on the mind of Cyrus. And before the contest closed, Christ himself came to Gabriel's aid. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 120 days, Gabriel declares. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia, Daniel 10:13. All that heaven could do in behalf of the people of God was done. The victory was finally gained. The forces of the enemy were held in check all the days of Cyrus and all the days of his son Cambyses, who reigned about 7.5 years.
Okay, so there we have a pretty succinct description of the conflict that was going on and what was keeping Gabriel from helping Daniel understand. Though he did understand, but he was mourning because it was getting the work done. So I still have a few minutes left. No, go ahead, brother.
If you looking at the teacher's comments, and in the book it's on page 147. But you recognize that it's pointing out that when the term Michael is used as the name of the many names for Christ, that it really epitomizes that without him, it would work. And that he's the one who makes the difference. He's the one who changes the tide. He's the one who puts things, in the right. And it makes it really clear. And if you go to the second to the last paragraph, it's about 2.5 inches up from the bottom of the page. I find it interesting that they recognize, even in the bullet quarterly here, it says, John the Baptist upon first sight understood Jesus as a warrior with a winnowing fan in his hand who will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire, looking at Matthew 3:12. And it says later, John thought that he was mistaken, and that mistaken was whether Christ was even the Messiah. Because it says, because Jesus was expelling demons and healing the sick instead of waging war against the people's enemies. So the fact that that's even noted here in the quarterly, helps me to realize that there's a lot of things that are peppered in here that are little elements of the truths that we have so prominently been understanding. But I know that the church doesn't understand.
Right.
But the fact that some of these elements are present in the quarterly is refreshing, because it means that there are other people, at least when you go to talk about these things, it's going to connect with them.
Right.
So.
So we know again that Christ came to the aid of Gabriel and
As Michael.
as Michael, yes. And I lost my train of thought, and that's really easy. But he brought the victory in swaying the mind of Cyrus to get the work done. But this chapter really is just an introduction into the next two. It's one vision. I have actually no other thoughts. Perhaps we could turn to Friday. Let's turn to Friday. And it seems like that's where they generally limit the Ellen White quotes to on Friday. But there's two different, two paragraphs, two different books. If I can read, if someone read the first paragraph from Prophets and Kings, this will just be our closing thoughts on today's lesson. So first, someone read the first paragraph, and then a different person read the second paragraph.
Further thought. For 3 weeks, Gabriel wrestled with the powers of darkness, seeking to counteract the influences at work on the mind of Cyrus. All that heaven could do in behalf of the people of God was done. The victory was finally gained. The forces of the enemy were held in check all the days of Cyrus and all the days of his son Cambyses.
Okay, let's stop there. It's a little bit of a repeat, but just reinforcing that these powers are working upon our minds, and it's our minds. That's the battle. Is for our mind, and what takes precedence in our lives, what's forefront in our thoughts throughout the day. I mean, we all are burdened with, and aren't we just overburdened with the cares of this world? It's amazing to me how much more burdened we are, it seems, than prior to November 9th. I don't know if any of y'all feel that way, but I certainly feel that way. That you've got the darkness there, but you have the angels of light, you have all heaven and all power of heaven fighting on our side. And I know this is kind of making this a moralistic type of presentation instead of a prophetic. At this point I'm kind of short on prophetic insight. So if I take one, go ahead.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that it wasn't just a battle and the battle was fought and they all went home. It wasn't like that. I mean, maybe in the scheme of eternity it seems like that, but the whole battle keeps up. And it keeps up all the days of Cyrus and the days of Cambyses. It's like Satan wasn't giving up. He was going to keep on going. And this, okay, if you want to say prophetically, this is us. This battle is not going to go away. And we need what? Michael.
We'll finish off with this last paragraph. I'll read it since I haven't read. What great honor is shown to Daniel by the majesty of heaven. He comforts his trembling servant and assures him that his prayer has been heard in heaven. In answer to that fervent petition, the angel Gabriel was sent to affect the heart of the Persian king. The monarch had resisted the impressions of the Spirit of God during the 3 weeks while Daniel was fasting and praying. But heaven's prince, the archangel Michael, was sent to turn the heart of the stubborn king to take some decided action to answer the prayer of Daniel. So, just as David said, Michael is what we need, who we need, and I think if we can remember this chapter, go ahead, brother.
No, you can finish your thought.
I'm just saying, remember this chapter when we're feeling discouraged or, your prayers aren't being answered. Don't give up, because you've got angels striving for you. You've got Gabriel, who's right there, at the throne. And you've got Michael.
I think that this whole chapter and what we're studying right now has a lot more to do with us than we would realize. Because Daniel, if you look at Daniel, for instance, he had a very vested interest in it. He was one of the Jews. He wanted to see his people go back. He was understanding, the books, referring to all of God's prophets that spoke in various ways about these things. And if you look at Cyrus, let's just be honest, Cyrus was a heathen king. So you have to ask yourself a rhetorical question. How did this heathen king find out that he was spoken about in prophecy in the Bible, that he was supposed to do this work? So obviously he just didn't learn about it or just decide to do it all on his own. I believe firmly that Daniel was the one who was involved in trying to counsel him and let him know when he came into contact with him that this was what he was supposed to do. And so when Daniel saw that it wasn't happening, I think that's another reason why he seemed so upset about it. And if we try to apply that to today, I think that as we see the events that are taking place here, externally and internally, as we see things happen and we look at the lines and we understand that this is supposed to happen at this time, this is supposed to happen at this time, I think we're going to realize that there's things that could be happening that are even within the framing of one dispensation. There could be a delay of certain things happening because of the thing that Satan's doing. And God is trying to strengthen us right now to understand these things as we go through. And it's not just for us as priests. It's going to be the same thing is going to be also for the Levites and for the Nethinims as their understanding grows.
Yeah, our experience is only beginning. It's not going to stop. It's not
Right.
going to stop.
So I think it does tie more into us today than we realize right now. A lot more.
All right, our time is up. And so let's, those who can will kneel and close in prayer. Loving Father in heaven, again, we thank you for the beautiful Sabbath day. And we thank you for this lesson study, Lord, and the encouragement that the holy angels are just waiting, Father, to assist us, Lord, and that there's a constant battle, Lord, for our minds. And we have the angels, holy angels on our side, and Michael himself, the archangel, Lord. Help us not to forget these things, Lord. And I just pray that wherever any error or misteaching took place, that you would cover that, Lord. And I just pray for the rest of the Sabbath day that you would just continue to grant us your presence and your blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.